That looks incredible. I have no nostalgia to this, but that is awesome. I would want that. That's just cool. Generic intro into that goes Moo here, back on a Scott Waz video, and today we're doing classic NES series for Game Boy Advance, which I actually had a Game Boy Advance SP. Absolutely loved it. I went from that to the original DS, which I also loved that as well. It was actually the last two Game Boy consoles, I guess handhelds, that I ever had. But this is the next episode in the Scott Gets Robbed arc. Last week's video was, I believe, it's a compilation from Scott's Snippets, which is weird, like, Nintendo Wii accessories and Nintendo DS accessories. You can check out my reaction to that. I'll leave it right up there. Also, link down below in the description. Also, in a playlist on my channel, all my other Scott the Wild's reactions. Go in chronological order if you want to binge watch through all of them. I'm going to learn a lot about this because I've never played an NES before, and I don't think I had any of these games for my Game Boy Advance. I mostly just played, like, I guess Pokemon and Kirby games, or just one Kirby. I think I had, like, Dreamland, and that was the only Kirby game I ever had, but I had a couple Pokemon games, like Pokemon Emerald and Ruby and Sapphire and whatnot, but this is going to be an exciting video. Nonetheless, shout out to patrons. I would not be able to do this if it was not for them. They got all the videos a day early. Last week, we got like 5 patrons within 40 minutes, which is just crazy because, like, I'm lucky to get 5 patrons in like a month, like 5 new patrons in a month. So to get 5 within 40 minutes is absolutely insane. It's a very, very rough January, but I'm still making as many videos as ever because I absolutely love making videos, and hopefully I can make people's days just a tiny little bit better. And I do read our comments, leave some down below. Let me know what the next Scott the Waz video should be, and I will definitely check that before I go and watch the next one. We're going to learn a lot about games in this one that I've never even heard of, but let's go ahead and jump on into it. Oh.
Hey y'all, Scott here. This is getting old. I may have finally stopped getting robbed 2 weeks ago, but I just started getting robbed 3 weeks ago.
Oh, well,
this is getting
had to start
ridiculous.
somewhere.
I'm gonna make some calls and get to the bottom of this.
Oh.
A bank?
The bank?
The bank.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could take out a loan to assign a hit.
Let me check.
Can't do that.
Are you sure your name isn't you?
No, it's me.
No.
Yeah, we repossessed most of your belongings. We are a bank after all.
Is that where his
Thank
stuff
God,
went?
I wasn't robbed. So, can I take out a loan to repossess the repossessed?
No, you repossessed your stuff for a reason. We asked if you had any debts and you just wrote SOS.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Listen, I've seen your services around town. We'll send you a care package to help you get back on your feet.
Care package?
Until
What?
then, sir, this is a Domino's.
I thought you said this was a bank.
Same
Yeah,
thing.
A night bank.
What is a night bank? Ice climber.
I'll make this work.
The classics. Games you may not
that's the
play
care
all
package.
the time, but the idea you can play them on your current system and pull them out whenever and wherever
I never
you
had
are,
that
it
one.
helps you sleep at night.
I had
And
the
honest
SP,
to God,
and it was
what's
great.
better to fiddle in your pocket with an ice climber? This is a lineup of games released for the Game Boy Advance throughout 2004, titled the
I
Classic
think really
NES
2004. It
series.
looks so much
Old
older.
school games for the Nintendo Entertainment System re-released on
Yes,
GBA for
that
20
one.
bucks a pop. You can't
Really?
beat that deal. This is one of Nintendo's first major instances of really pushing nostalgia for that NES era, releasing these games alongside a special edition Game Boy Advance SP
Never had
modeled
that
after
one.
the system. Same thing in Japan. They released a model
That's
of the handheld designed after
cool.
the Japanese NES, the Famicom. Look how tiny this box is. It's adorable. I think the North American variant wins in the handheld aesthetic departments, though. I mean, yeah, it does mimic the Famicom, but oh boy, ketchup and mayonnaise. Now, the Famicom released in
what's wrong with that?
1983. The NES released in 1985. All of this happened in 2004, so I think they were trying to break even for the system's 20th anniversary. They were probably just rounding up.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
24,
for the average.
though. I always round up, so to be more precise, I'm 2. I'm for one sort of critical of Nintendo's over-reliance on nostalgia sometimes, but I'm their target demographic for this because no matter what they do, if it's 8-bit, I don't think, I just clap. Like, man,
Oh.
you're really pushing
I should be
things here. They had the nerve
reacting
to,
to
sell Ice
the
Climber
Switch
for
2 trailer.
$20. Yeah, $20 was cheaper than regular Game Boy Advance games, so this isn't a regular Game Boy Advance game, it's Ice Climber.
I don't even know what
This
Ice Climber
NES
is.
Game Boy Advance SP
I'm not gonna know
is
any of
so
these games.
Cool. The outside is like the system, but the inside is like the controller. It's even textured like an actual NES gamepad. Okay, so I really like this design, but it just reminds me of the people who wear NES t-shirts. I'm awkward. The Game Boy Micro
You know,
also got a special edition themed around the
if you
Famicom.
showed me
this time
consoles,
the
I
controller. This
wouldn't
one
be able to
released
tell you
in
which one's the
2005 in
NES.
both Japan and the US, and I think this design eclipses both SPs. It is gorgeous.
It's like Iron Man.
Though this was released specifically in commemoration of the 20th anniversary with no real ties to the classic NES series. Well, 12 games were released under the classic NES series label, with most hitting store shelves on June 2nd, 2004 alongside the special edition SP, plus a few more later on October 25th, 2004. Most of them were Nintendo Nintendo developed and published titles. We got Super Mario Brothers, The Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, Excitebike,
that doesn't
Ice
have a case.
Climber, Dr. Mario, Metroid, and Zelda 2. There
Zelda
were
2,
also a few
wow.
third-party games licensed to Nintendo for release in the series. Pac-Man, Bomberman, Xevious, and Castlevania. Aesthetically
of
speaking,
Castlevania.
these are really
heard of
fun
some
to
of
put
these.
all next to each other. They all follow a basic black design, reminiscent of the original black box Nintendo releases. However, most of these games didn't originally have the black box design, one with a few sprites and a big title and that iconic font. So Nintendo gave them a black box design. They cropped their box arts and put them on black. It's a little lame. I think it would have been fun to actively design covers as if these games had the black box design from back in the day or something, rather than just putting the cover on a black background. I mean, at this point, you already have the top of the box saying classic NES series. You could have just used the original box art, not cropped, and everything would have still looked uniform and nice. But
have been confusing?
no, you just had to put more effort in to make it look like you put less effort in. The boxes do feel like mini NES game boxes, though. I'll give them that. The back descriptions and screenshots are unique compared to the NES originals, mentioning how the NES Classic is back. Finally, play Pac-Man on the go for the 20th time ever. But they still feel very genuinely charming and retro. Even if they don't cost a lot on eBay right now, you still want to treat them with respect. Most of these releases were born to die being a collectible. The next big indicator of the classic NES
true. They
series
were
title
dated.
is the cartridge itself. Now, most people would probably go, what's the difference? And to that I say, invest in neon. Classic NES GBA games are a lighter tone of gray, the exact same lighter tone of gray as legitimate NES game cartridges. They put so much damn detail in all of this. This truly feels like they legitimately cared.
Did they?
Turns out they did these few things just to barely reach that bar. Alright, so let's try these out. First up,
That's
we
so much
can't go wrong
packaging
with a
for
little bit
that.
of Super Mario Brothers. Unless you use it as insulin. Look at that in all its glory. You know, I can't understate how amazing it was to finally get these games in an uncompromised portable form. Put a D in front of that. So this is Super Mario Brothers on the NES, on the Game Boy Advance. However, fun quirk of the Game Boy Advance was the screen size. It's not 4x3, it's not widescreen. I consider it
square.
husky. NES games were all 4x3, so Nintendo had two options. Either put black bars on the sides like a Samaritan, or embrace chaos. So they built this
Chaos.
Good for them.
I'm up for the
If
chaos.
they didn't, the group of people who play retro games stretched with smoothing filters on, minimized with borders, well, there's no telling what they'd do. Our nation is separated. They didn't just simply stretch the games to fill the screen, though. They meticulously removed unnecessary pixels to effectively fit the game in this wonky resolution. Thus, whatever the f this is. You have to give them credit. They wanted to see these games fill the screen, and they did it without simply stretching them, though they still look a little wonky.
Is it to make it look
let's see if I can
cleaner?
compare this to similar releases. Here we have Super Mario Bros. Deluxe on Game Boy Color. It's similarly a version of Super Mario Bros. You can play on the go. So here's the advantage you get with the classic NES series. They didn't just zoom into the screen. With Deluxe, sometimes you can't see what's above you, behind you, in front of you, because they just zoomed in to make everything viewable on such a tiny screen. So the GBA version is a bit more playable. But you're missing the calendar. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe was a new deluxe.
How does Scott know what a
Mario
calendar
1.
is?
It included extra modes, a save feature, Mario 2 from
Oh,
Japan
this is
was
before
included,
he did
tons of
that,
little
right?
bonus features that I just adore. Look at that. Is this necessary? No, and that's what
This was before the
classic NES series Super
bootleg
Mario
Christmas.
Brothers. It's just Super Mario Brothers. There's nothing else to it, and that's what the classic NES series was. They weren't remakes. They were, by and large, the original NES games, no frills, for your Game Boy Advance. I mean, pressing L and R brings us this menu.
Okay.
Ooh. Damn, everybody, let's talk about the weather
Tucson.
app. Well, Super Mario Brothers
What?
is a classic
He's in
game.
Ohio.
It's one that'll never get old and one that's great to have at a moment's notice. It plays well here, and while it was possible to play the game in some capacity on the Game Boy Advance before, this version is much more tailor-made for the handheld while also being more true to the original. Of course, it had to be a part of the classic NES series. Now, is it worth the $20 MSRP? Well, for like $10 more, you could get any of the Mario Advance series, which were fully fleshed out remakes and ports of the other 2D Mario games, including some new levels, mechanics, modes, the side
go
game
through
of Mario
blocks.
Brothers. It's a tough situation because the entire gimmick of these releases is that, oh, it's the original NES game on a smaller cartridge. Honestly, making these collections or something would have taken away from that collectability, I guess. And
yeah, true.
$20,
Absolutely.
That's kind of the bare minimum you can price a physical game without discounts or price cuts. I'd say this one is a bit iffy on if it makes sense for 20. At the time, you could definitely find a copy of Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for less, which had more features. Plus, back in 2004, I think our nation was more used to screen crunch like this. I'd put this in the
that was
middle on
bad.
the worth 20 scale. Next up, Ice Climber.
I mean, I
think
never had
Nintendo
it, but-
re-released this for a tax break. Ice Climber is an iconic NES classic.
Is it?
Sure. Most of its appeal comes from the character's inclusion in Smash Brothers, which is 100% why the game was put in this series. Smash Brothers Melee did
the only Smash Brothers I've ever played. One weekend.
It's what convinced Nintendo to bring Fire Emblem outside of
ago.
Japan, so I think they decided to re-release Ice Climber for that very same reason. Can't wait for that return on investment. The original Ice Climber isn't a terrible game. It's just a bad one. I think there's a bit of merit to this game. Like, the controls are absolutely atrocious, but I think that's partially on purpose to give the game more challenge. But you can select any level from the start, so it's like, who cares about the challenge? There, I beat the game. The two-player mode was seemingly removed. That remained in Super Mario Brothers, but the multiplayer in that game is just past the Game Boy when you die. But alas, you have to connect another Game Boy Advance to have the option appear.
How?
Good. For $20, no, hell, I'll pay you $20 to stay away. And as it's time and a place in Nintendo history, I do sort of like it in some respects. Its core gameplay is fairly enjoyable. It's just the damn controls, man. But as nice as I'm willing to be about this game, let's be fair. This game, as its standalone Game Boy Advance release, that.
Oh, yeah.
This should be nothing more than a
friends.
side game in a bigger game, like Mario Brothers Arcade and the Mario Advance releases. And I think what stings the most here is the fact that Nintendo already re-released Ice Climber as an e-reader card set for the Game Boy Advance.
What is a Pokemon?
Yeah, so this was a major piece of criticism against the classic NES series. The fact that a good handful of these games, they were already on the Game Boy Advance via e-reader cards.
What is an e-reader card?
The e-reader was an accessory for the GBA that nobody heard of until 2 sentences ago. You'd scan cards to unlock goodies in games or play games right off the cards. Thus, some NES games were re-released via this method for $5 a pack. Of course, you already had to own the e-reader, which costs $40 in of itself. Keep the e-reader plugged in the entire time and hopelessly scan 5 cards in a row. The opportunity cost may outweigh things here.
Why
it's
5
a little
cards?
unfair to be like, oh, well, you sold Ice Climber for $5, Nintendo. Why is it $20 now? Because you already had to own an e-reader. Scanning cards was clunky compared to just inserting a cartridge. Just buying the classic NES series game is a simpler option here.
Yes.
Doesn't mean the game is worth $20. Excitebike. Now this has more value than Ice Climber in my opinion. I think everybody likes Excitebike. Either that or nobody cares enough to put energy into hating it. Wow, you hate Excitebike? You fucking badass!
I've never heard of it, Scott.
Before. You can save your custom-built tracks now.
Why did that move?
That elegant. You don't get a ton of save slots like you do in the 3D Classics remake for 3DS, but it's a noticeable upgrade from how the game operated on NES. This was another.
Does that really need a
game
3DS
card,
remake?
So that was an issue. You can save your custom tracks in that version, so I finally understand the value of $15.
Wow.
Excitebike's a better
In
game
2004.
than Ice Climber, though, and has more replay value. I'd say it's in the middle on the $20
You know,
scale.
$20 in 2008 maybe it's about a house. I don't know.
Donkey Kong. To answer your question, it's not the arcade version, it's the NES version. What did you think we've been talking about? Donkey Kong's always fun to replay, but I mean,
I'm so lost.
it's just 3 levels, 1 screen each. And the NES version, while perfectly fine, it cuts out one of the stages from the arcade game, the Pie Factory. So it's like, sure, you can use this game to just try to go for the high score, but wouldn't that feel more rewarding if you had the true arcade version in the palm of your hands? You could practice and practice and practice on Game Boy and show up to the arcade, get the high score, and in tandem laid. This is just a way to play Donkey Kong on the go, but at that point, just get Donkey Kong for Game Boy. That original arcade game was remade, and there's 90 plus puzzle platform levels afterwards, and that game cost around like $4 in 2004. Plus Donkey Kong.
It's also in the e-reader. Oh, dude.
Release. Also, they could have re-released Donkey Kong Classics, which was Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. on one NES cartridge. I know the whole
Isn't it just Diddy Kong?
It's the original authentic one NES game now on your GBA, but like, come on. $20? I love the original Donkey Kong, but this is pushing it. Frankly, I don't think it's worth it. The Legend of Zelda. See, this is one of those games they forced the black box design on. Like, it looks fine and standardized with the rest of the series, but would it have really looked that out of place with the original box art design?
Gold. I think my mom actually has that.
This was the first time Zelda 1 was available portably, and it's an incredibly solid version. They even went in and fixed up some
not even a
text here in
gamer.
the beginning that was in dire need of an editor in the original. I think Zelda works great as a handheld game. If this was your first time playing, it can take a while to get through if you don't immediately know where to go, and I think portability helps as you can kind of chip away at it. I would have loved to see a remake of this game on Game Boy Advance, a la how Nintendo remade Metroid 1 as Metroid Zero Mission, but for $20, I think this was a standout release.
I think Zelda's come a long way.
Definitely money's worth out of this game. Until 2 years later when Nintendo re-released it on Wii's Virtual Console for $5. Alright, so those are the Nintendo games on June 2nd. What about the third parties? I am sorry I asked. Bomberman
You
by
shouldn't have asked.
Nintendo still published these Game Boy Advance versions, and I'm sure they developed these ports, but this was
Only
always
for
a
Game Boy
Hudson Soft
Advance
property.
and
Well,
DS.
Bomberman has always been there for most Nintendo platforms. I'm sure some people think of him as a Nintendo character. Hell, he's been in Nintendo games with Nintendo characters. So this makes sense. On paper, one of the defining elements of Bomberman games is the multiplayer mode, and it's not locked behind a link cable. It's just not here. It's
Wait, what?
just the single player mode from the NES game. It's fine, but you do realize how many ways there were to play Bomberman on Game Boy Advance, right? I mean,
No.
most Bomberman games are kind of interchangeable. A Bomberman game is a Bomberman game. Some are better than others, but at the end of the day, most will give you your Bomberman fix. So it's like, all of these exist, you know? And Bomberman
get
is
this
known
one.
for multiplayer. You take it out of the equation, and the main game is okay, but it's so strange to me that they went to all this trouble to preserve elements of
dodged.
these other titles, but strip Bomberman of its headlining feature. No! Pac-Man
not worth
is
it.
The NES version, of course.
It's
and
just
I've
Pac-Man.
been critical of this one before. Listen, it's not a bad addition.
What's
of the
different
game at
about it?
all.
How
I
can you
just
change
don't like when
Pac-Man?
products claim to have Pac-Man included, and it's the damn NES version of the game. You're telling me I got horny for nothing? The graphics and sound are just different enough to make this feel kinda lame. This is one of the strangest inclusions to the series. Pac-Man was already well represented on the Game Boy Advance. You had an Namco museum with the original arcade version alongside a handful of other Namco classics, and Pac-Man Collection, which had
Galaga.
Pac-Man and various other games from the series. Both
I
of
played
these
that at a
games
barcade
came out
before.
well before the classic NES series release of Pac-Man, so it's fair to say you could find them for $20 or less at this point. So this just feels like a waste. Why would you buy this outside of collector's purposes? There's no reason for this to exist. I think Nintendo did this one because it's Pac-Man. It's not like it's an iconic
I mean, it'll
NES
sell.
game, but I think it kind of helped bring more eyes to the lineup. Like, everybody knows Pac-Man.
Even I know
It
Pac-Man,
reminds them
yeah.
of the NES era, so sure, I didn't need lunch today. It's
$20?
like on the front of the
One
NES
for
Classic
$20.
Edition mini console box. Like, why is Pac-Man highlighted here? There are so many other games iconic to the NES that they could have chosen to represent.
recognition.
Instead,
Did you say Pac-Man?
Definitely
finally,
not
we
worth
had
it.
Xevious
Okay.
on this day. Another Namco arcade classic getting its NES
Never
version
heard of this one.
re-released. They added autofire to this version, which is kind of nice, but other than that, it's Xevious. Oh my god, finally. At least this game wasn't available elsewhere on Game Boy Advance, so
Okay.
good for me. I
I
get
guess
it all to
it's worth
myself.
it.
But I'm an American, alright. If there's two things I don't care about, it's my morals and Xevious. This game
Why?
is far more popular in Japan, and while I
Why?
think it's still fairly well known over here,
It's not.
there are so many other NES games. Hell, Namco or Nintendo developed and published games that would have made so much more sense for a classic NES series re-release. A fine
So why did they
game,
pick
it's
this
a little
one?
too high score centric for me to consider it worth the $20. Though I think it's at the very least half worth it. And
Well,
that
it's
was
also-
the first wave of the classic NES series. Cool collectibles that just didn't have a ton of value outside of that. The games they picked were so basic. It made it difficult to warrant picking some of these up, which I think they tried to rectify this complaint with the second and final wave. On October 25th,
Dr. Mario,
2004, we
Castlevania,
got
Metroid,
4 more
and
titles.
Link.
First up, Dr. Mario. Oh, guys,
Okay.
come on. Did you really have to put black bars around the artwork? Who cares? Most of the image is the artwork anyways. Just go all the way. Especially the
true.
third-party games I just went over. These just look bad. Pac-Man probably looks the best. Bomberman, they cropped out most of the artwork, and
changed.
the original box art would have just been so easy to translate over. And Xevious,
It all would have been
well,
so
they just
easy.
didn't care. Dr. Mario's a safe bet being a
They
puzzle
clearly
game.
didn't.
For sure get your time out of this one. If you wanted to play a Dr. Mario game on the handheld, this was giving you exactly what you were looking for. You could have gotten the
Is it
original
just
Game Boy
Tetris?
version. Hell, that one technically sold better than the NES one, so more people may have had memories of this one, strangely enough. But for a game all about matching light colors,
It's just
stay away.
complex
There
Tetris.
were more ways to play Dr. Mario on GBA. In WarioWare Mega Micro Games, you could unlock the Dr. Wario game, which was fundamentally NES Dr. Mario, just with a few sprites changed. And a year after
Okay.
this classic NES series release, you could pick up Dr. Mario and Puzzle League, which included a much better version of Dr. Mario and another puzzle game entirely. The best puzzle game entirely. You know what? I'll
it's-
say this
it's
was worth the 20
Tetris,
bones,
right?
at least at the time. I mean, this was perfect for the pick up and play style. There wasn't a Dr. Mario on the system natively at the time. The closest thing was an unlockable unlockable
What are
minigame in
those
WarioWare.
things?
That wasn't like a full port of NES Dr. Mario. It was a joke inclusion that could also effectively double as a Dr. Mario alternative in a pinch.
But, like-
and Dr. Mario and Puzzle League came out afterwards, so you can't really blame them for that. I will give this my full praises. It might have been worth $20.
Oh.
Metroid, this kind of works with the black box.
What is
design,
Dr.
considering
Mario?
Metroid was one of the games that followed the template but used silver for some reason. If anything, this box actually might look better than the original. Metroid can be hard to go back to, especially without a map system. It's hard to know where to go and even where you are, which is why I would recommend the remake on Game Boy Advance,
Which
Metroid
looks way better.
Zero Mission. It does a phenomenal job contextualizing that original
so that's
NES game as a
Samus,
modern
right?
title. It has quality of life improvements without feeling too easy or like it's holding your hand, while also featuring tons of added content. It's the definitive way to experience the first game in the series. And it came out in February of 2004 and included the original NES Metroid in its entirety as an unlockable for beating the game.
For
I guess
beating
this
the
is
game,
for
you
the people who wanted to play the original Metroid on GBA but didn't want to put in the work to beat Metroid Zero Mission to unlock it.
Sure.
Honey, if you want to play Metroid 1 but not Metroid Zero Mission, that's your own damn fault. This is just weird. I mean, the version of Metroid included in Zero Mission is basically the exact same. There are a few discrepancies, like some sprites look a little different in the Zero Mission version, but they're both NES Metroid. There's no true differences. It's hard to imagine Metroid not being a part of this series. I get that. But when you already released Metroid Zero Mission earlier that year, it just feels unnecessary.
Was it
Really,
like
the other
delayed?
way
Is that
around,
why?
This came out before Zero Mission? Sure. But no. Instead, they're forcing me to bitch about it 17 years later.
Yeah.
Whoops. Bastards. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Following in the steps of the Zelda 1 box design-wise, this is another
that was the
solid
first Zelda game
Zelda
with the
2
gold?
may not have been the most beloved Zelda title, but it's still a good game. It's
I'm
just
still gonna play 2
different,
Zelda.
and the amount of playtime you get out of it, well, I think it makes it well worth the $20 price tag. And finally,
Wow, that was short.
Castlevania, the last classic NES series title, and another third-party one by Konami.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
I don't know anything about
It's
it.
just a really stupid cropping of the silver box art. Like, really? I
Like,
think this
the
is also
face of
well
the
worth
dude in the
investment.
background.
Castlevania was already in a renaissance on the Game Boy Advance with 3 original titles on it. Those followed in the footsteps of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, so there was still a void of classic Castlevania. And I think this was a great addition to the lineup. Well, that's the classic NES series. For collectors, it's a pretty fun series. It's cool to have these miniature NES boxes and great cartridges and try to go for them all. But for players, I just feel like there's not enough there to warrant a purchase. These games were just kind of neat little novelties, but that was about
especially
it.
nowadays,
Only
because like
games I think
it's
that you
nostalgic
could
on
actually want
nostalgic.
to purchase on were Zelda 1, 2, and Castlevania. But they were kind of cool releases just for the novelty alone. And just like that, Japan told us to go f ourselves.
Why?
These are the Japanese versions of the classic.
They're gonna be
NES
so much better,
series,
aren't they?
titled the Famicom miniseries. They went above and beyond in Japan. First off, the packaging.
That looks
it's entirely
incredible.
unique. Unlike traditional GBA game boxes, a clear plastic container with numerous cardboard inserts holding an exact replica of the original box art, now the size of a matchbox.
That's so
the instructions
cool.
are all folded up, nice and neat. These just feel like so much love and attention.
That looks
was put
so
into them.
much
Even
better.
Games that originally had different box dimensions on the
It's like a
Famicom,
little mini
they
box.
accommodated for them, and games that released via the Famicom disk system, well, they have their own style of box as well. And because the disk system games were yellow, the cards are too. The standard games have a color scheme reminiscent of the Famicom console, not the cartridges, because they were all different kinds of colors. It would have been really cool if they used the same colors each cartridge was originally, but this is still neat. The games themselves, it's the same story as before, except these are the Japanese versions. But Japan got dozens more games on top of every single one that released in North America. Mario Brothers, Balloon Fight, Clue Clue Land, Wrecking Crew, Famicom Detective Club 1 and 2, Kid Icarus, The Mysterious Monosaurian Castle, Shin Onigashima, Super Mario Brothers 2, Mappy, Star Soldier, SD Gundam
Kid Icarus?
Girl,
You mean
Dig Dug,
Kid
Don
Icarus?
Bear, Goemon, Ghost and Goblins.
They've done a video
Adventure
together.
Island, and Twinbee were all Japan exclusives. And my god, why did we get Ice Climber out of all of these? There were so many games
Smash
that
Bros.
would have made perfect sense in North America. I mean, come on, Dig Dug, and you gave us Xevious? I know Dig Dug was already on Namco Museum, but still, like, why did we get Xevious? I think this lineup of games does a far better job representing the NES or
What is he
Famicom
breaking?
I think Contra, Mega Man, Bubble Bobble, Punch Out, River City Ransom, Double Dragon, Tecmo Bowl, Kung Fu, those seem like they would have been easy to get as a part of the series and would have really helped to lock this in as the perfect celebration of the console that started it all. But these will do. I have similar complaints towards why some of these got the re-release. Like Mario Brothers, Really? That was included in damn near every Mario game on the Game Boy Advance, and it was a much better version than the NES game. Each day Nintendo re-releases Clue Clue Land, I hear gunshots. However, the Famicom Detective Club games, well, those are huge titles. I can't blame it all, but these were great inclusions for Japanese-speaking players. Balloon Fight, I would have preferred compared to Ice Climber over here. There's just far more variety.
Everything gets compared to Ice Climber.
There was more released, and they made sure you knew that by releasing these boxes. Japan's Club Nintendo loyalty program offered these.
Dude, Club Nintendo sounds awesome back in its.
Every game from the Famicom miniseries at the time. They came in unique mailers.
I have no nostalgia to this, but that is awesome.
Coolest collectibles I
would want that. That's just cool.
Volumes, the first two being the cartridge-based games, the third disc system. Each one has this amazing slipcover featuring sprite art from the games included. Opening them up, we get each of the games nestled and displayed.
That's
with a plaque.
just so
this
cool.
This is the kind of treatment I love to see video games get. This almost looks like something you'd see in the Football Hall of Fame, but
or that's something
cooler.
that like
that's
an influencer would get sent. You know, like
in the Super Bowl. Like, who gives a shit, dude? That's fucking dick.
You know, like
now,
media packaging kind of deal.
Specific titles: Mobile Suit Z Gundam Hot Scramble and Second
or
Super
promotional.
Wars. The former being a limited 2,000 copy print run giveaway to owners of a Gundam game on GameCube. The latter being just a straight up purchase bonus for another GameCube game. And buy that game, get this one. These ones were released later on after the initial Famicom miniseries wrapped.
I wonder
up.
how much those go for.
Happy with just these.
Nowadays.
They've been some of my most wanted collectibles for a while now. I've always loved the look of them, and on top
So
of that,
cool.
they're functional. I have practically the entire Famicom mini collection by owning these. I can get used to this whole owning thing again.
Oh yeah.
That worked. I'm gonna need more stuff to talk about for the coming weeks, though.
Well, gonna have to call Domino's.
Yeah, it's
No.
It's no. Wow. Okay. Well, I learned a lot. I'll say that, and that packaging. I love good packaging. I don't know who doesn't like good packaging for. I don't know, just anything in general. It just feels like they care more, but so many places just kind of like skip out and cheap out on packaging. It's so sad. Like, I remember when packaging used to be like, real, especially like with phones and stuff. Like when you got a phone, you got like crazy packaging. Now it's just, you don't even get a charging brick, no headphones, no nothing. It's just that and so many other things. Like I have a box at my parents' house in their attic it's just a big box. And it's filled with little boxes of like things that I got that just had like nice packaging. Like in case I ever want to sell them, like when I had to like swap out when I changed microphones, I put the old microphone in that box. I gave it to my cousin. My old webcam before I upgraded to this one, I kept the box for that. So I sold that. I still have the original packaging, which is important to do that. But you know, like I just keep some stuff that's just like really good packaging because it's kind of like, this is really cool. Like when Vitamin Water sends me stuff for, you know, videos and whatnot, I'm just like, I'm keeping the packaging because it's promotional special packaging. My dad actually has probably a one-of-one Kobe Bryant poster that's probably the only one that exists in the entire world right now, and it's like and it's for like 8 feet tall poster, and it's of Kobe Bryant. It's never been used, and like I said, there was only like less than 50 of them ever made, and it's probably the only one that still exists, and that was a promotional thing that his job was just going to throw out, so he kept, and he's had it all this time, and we have absolutely no idea how much it's worth, because it's just, what is it? It's just what is it? We've showed it to people, and they have no idea, but I don't know, just packaging is really, really cool, and I really want to know how much you know, that collection was. I guess there's like 3 of them, and Scott said, I guess Scott has all 3 of them with all the games and everything, which is really, really cool. I wouldn't be surprised if Taylor has this. Taylor, let me know if you do in the comment section. I will be reading all your comments. Leave them down below. Let me know if the next Scott was video. I'm going to go react to the Switch 2 trailer, and hopefully I'll be getting one of those so I can play Mario Party, and that's going to be fun. But hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. But until the next video, take care, and key to music.
We were playing